Welcome back to the Power of Design. After that much-needed break, at least as far as I'm concerned, this is not exactly about the power of design, the conversation I think we're about to have, but my old friend Andy Borowitz is here to entertain you and maybe to entertain me as well. Andy, as you know, if you've read his biography in the booklet, is a man of extraordinary accomplishments. He created a hugely successful television show back in his youth. He has since been a best-selling author, created early on in the digital age, our subject later tonight, a website called the Borowitz Report, which was then a decade later, not a quick exit strategy, but a long-term exit strategy acquired by the New Yorker magazine, where Andy is a contributor. And we're going to talk a little bit, or a lot, I guess, about complaint. When we were speaking a couple of weeks ago, and Andy is not, in my experience, a big complainer, but you had a big complaint, which is that for what you do, satirizing the world, that the world lately has conspired to make your job, I guess you could say, either more difficult or harder, because it itself is kind of self-satirizing.
It's true. I mean, I don't know how many people have read my column, but my column it's a fake news column. So I'm taking our experience and exaggerating it slightly, reframing it slightly so that it's absurd and hopefully funny. And the problem now is that reality is sort of posing an existential threat to me. Because our reality is now so absurd that it's impossible to exaggerate, and it's gotten to the point where people have a very difficult time distinguishing what I am writing from what is actually happening in the real world. And sometimes it's been made more difficult by the fact that I will write something absurd, and then a day later or hours later it will happen. So then it just looks like I'm a time traveler of some sort. I'm just not.
And so it's how impressive is that? Anyway?
Well, I know it's not even at that point. It's not even fake news. It's just early, you know. And so it's and this. So I guess my only complaint, really, and we'll get on to some other smaller complaints, but I guess my only complaint at this point would really just be with reality itself. That's that's sort of my pet peeve right now.
That's a kind of meta complaint.
It is kind of a meta complaint, sort of global. But speaking of global, I just wanted to share with the audience a couple of things I brought with me. This phenomenon of fake news being mistaken for real news has been a problem. It's been a problem for The Onion for many years, and I've had it over the years as well. It's gotten...
Do the North Koreans always believe that you're telling the truth?
The North Koreans, it's really, I'll tell you who it really is it's the Chinese. There's a very prominent news service in China called Xinhua. I know some of you might be familiar with it. This isn't like some crappy local patch website. This is like Reuters in China. And in the last year or so, they have picked up a few of my stories and reprinted them as if they were true. And you know, you got to imagine, Kurt, when something comes out in China, you're reaching a lot of people because that's a big, I don't know if you've seen it, but it's a big country.
So you're the Tom Friedman of China then.
I am like their go-to news source. And what I thought would be interesting is, because we have a lot of smart people in the audience today, I brought a few pieces that came out in the Borowitz Report in the last year that were picked up by Xinhua and reported as the real news in China. And I just want to read them. They're very short, so I won't keep you long, but I wanted to read you a few of these and tell me if at any point you might have a sense of whether or not you would be fooled into thinking this is true. Was there any maybe telltale sign that somebody was pulling your leg? So let me read the first one. This is, just to put this in some context, this was from last spring, and I don't know, it seems like forever ago, but last spring you mentioned North Korea. Kim Jong-un, the supreme leader of North Korea, was threatening a lot of missile tests, and everybody was kind of freaking out about that a little bit. So this was a headline in the Borowitz Report. The headline was, North Korean missile test delayed by Windows 8. Okay, no sense at all. Like you're reading this in Xinhua, and it seems perfectly fine. Let me go on a little bit with this. So, North Korea's official news agency announced today that the military's planned missile test had been put on hold because of, quote, problems with Windows 8. Intelligence analysts said that the announcement gave rare insight into the inner workings of North Korea's missile program, which until last year had been running on Windows 95. The announcement from the Korean Central News Agency, KCNA, did not indicate a new scheduled time for the missile test, saying only that it was, quote, working with Windows 8 support to resolve the issue. In the words of one intelligence analyst, that means the test has been delayed indefinitely. A source close to the North Korean regime reported that Supreme Leader Kim Jong-un is furious about the Windows 8 problems and is considering a number of options, including declaring war on Microsoft. So this was reported by Xinhua, and at no point did they see anything amiss in this. They just thought this seemed like a legitimate...
And they're North Korea's best friend, by the way. They should know.
That was, to me, one of the greatest ironies of this story, is that geographically and diplomatically, they are so much closer to that regime than, say, I am.
Yeah.
So it seems like a very weird kind of, convoluted way to get your news. To like, you could just maybe contact somebody in the government of North Korea, or you could go to this, Borowitz schmuck in New York and see what he has to say. So, but anyway, that was my first indication that Xinhua was taking me very seriously. This is another one that I was surprised again that Xinhua reported, and it then went sort of viral around the world, not as a humor piece, but as a real piece of news. This was last summer, and this was a big story I'm sure you remember because it involves the media, but there was a shocking, really surprise announcement that Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon, was acquiring the Washington Post. And so the day of that announcement, I published this story, and then of course a few hours later, Xinhua also published this story. And the headline was, Amazon founder says he clicked on Washington Post by mistake. All right, so some of you already figured out it's not a true story. Now, let's see at what point in this story would the truth start seeming to fall apart here a little bit. Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon.com, told reporters today that his reported purchase of the Washington Post was a gigantic mix-up, explaining that he had clicked on the newspaper by mistake. I guess I was just kind of browsing through their website and not paying close attention to what I was doing, he said. No way did I intend to buy anything. Mr. Bezos said he had been oblivious to his online shopping error until earlier today, when he saw an unusual charge for $250 million on his American Express statement. I don't even think I can continue reading this. It's just, they again thought that is sort of the way.
Maybe maybe Xinhua believes you are their correspondent on the Upper West Side.
It could be. I mean, I really have been functioning as that. Okay, so I just have one more, and then we'll just go on with our discussion. I don't want to do a reading series here, but this one I found kind of amazing. Now this I really need to put into context because it's kind of a New York story, but everybody knows political scandals, and in New York we've had a lot of very well documented political scandals over the last couple of years, and the two biggest ones that we've had in New York State would have to be Eliot Spitzer, the governor of New York State, who before he became a fabulous cable news host, he was a prostitute patronizing governor, and he I guess was hiring like $4,000 call girls, as we call them in New York City. But he was doing that, and then of course we had this guy, Congressman Anthony Weiner, who was involved in the first kind of selfie scandal, where he was like taking pictures of his package, and then he thought he was doing a direct message on Twitter, but instead he was sending it to like 50,000 followers. And so the only reason I'm sort of bringing you back up to date on those two scandals was because there was a brief, beautiful moment last spring, summer, where it looked like both of these guys were actively running for office in New York City. Eliot Spitzer was running for comptroller. A guy really lacking in control. It was really strange.
And self-control.
So no self-control at all. So it's a very strange, miscasting for him. But he was running for comptroller, and then Wiener was actually running for mayor of the city. And this was a really just glorious moment for comedians, because we just imagined that both of these guys would sum up. They were both leading in the polls, so it looked like we might actually have these two guys in office, and what fun that would be for us in the comedy profession. So anyway, after it came out, I think after Spitzer jumped in the race, there were two of these guys. I ran this piece on the Borowitz Report, and the headline was Berlusconi mulls New York race. And it was in a stunning bid for a political comeback. Former Italian Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi said today that he was considering running for office in New York City. Mr. Berlusconi announced his intentions after several local polls showed him with a higher approval rating than the candidates currently on offer in the city. For the disgraced former Prime Minister, the chance to start over again in New York is like a dream come true. In Italy, you make one little mistake, they throw you in jail 7 years, he said. New Yorkers are much more forgiving. Mr. Berlusconi said he had not yet decided what office to run for, but he was leaning toward public advocate. Now, in fairness, I've got to say, this story was not picked up by Xinhua in China. This story was picked up by an Italian publication owned by Silvio Berlusconi. So
That is fantastic.
so at that point you sort of just want to quit what you're doing and just step back and enjoy, just bask for the rest of your life.
The opposite happens to me sometimes as well. It happened recently when I saw a picture of ostensibly what I assumed to be a joke Photoshop picture of a new Taco Bell breakfast. The waffle taco with a waffle surrounding eggs, cheese, bacon, and maple syrup. I thought, okay, that's a funny joke. No, that's the new Taco Bell breakfast being introduced next week.
That's right. Well, but your complaint is the same as mine. It's just
Yes.
you're perceiving it from the opposite end, which is that our reality now is so absurd that it's impossible to discern one from the other. What is a joke and what's real? It's tricky.
Yeah.
It's tricky. If you care about knowing what's real, I mean, maybe that's our mistake. I mean, maybe we're being a little bit too
Old school. That reality fiction thing.
persnickety,
Yeah.
I would say. I don't know.
But some of the Borowitz Report headlines, one very recent one, in fact, it's funny, but it's literally true, which is to say, Obama's plan to pay people enough to eat stirs controversy.
Yeah, that was one. Sometimes I will just state the truth and just state it in a very bald way. I mean, I think one that I wrote once, which was really just true, but it I guess made sort of a satirical point, was there was a time when Obama was I guess signing threatening to sign a bunch of executive orders on gun control because Congress wasn't going along with any of them. And all these people were saying, Congress were saying that maybe he should be impeached for signing these executive orders, even though that's part of his, part of his executive job. And so I think the headline I did was, Republicans accuse Obama of using position as president to lead country. and it was really just true. I mean, it was just, that's why I'm like, half of what I do is not really exaggerating, it's just reframing. I'm just really just saying this is exactly what's going on. And
For instance, the one I loved and actually laughed out loud when I read was Arizona Governor vetoes anti-gay bill, quote, let's focus on discriminating against Mexicans.
Right. She felt, Jan Brewer did feel that this whole thing of trying to turn gays away from business was keeping them from their core business of harassing and tormenting Mexicans.
if one were to write an algorithm to be the Andy Borowitz report algorithm, I guess it would have to be coded to minimize but make perceptible the distance between the joke and reality. Right?
You know, it's funny that you put it about that, because it is kind of, I mean, all comedy is math in a way. I mean, we're trying to, you know, there's one conversation I once had with a guy, I just thought this would really put it well. Do you remember this guy, this Major League pitcher, Jim Bouton?
Sure,
He wrote this great book in the 60s called Ball 4, and it was all about his, I guess he was with the Yankees for a while.
Right.
He was the first guy to write kind of a tell-all locker room story, and he was airing a lot of dirty laundry, and people really got pissed off at him because it was just at a time where that was against the social code. And I met him at a party once, and he was talking about comedy, and he said, I really think most comedy is just reality times 1.2, and I really thought that was really a very concise way of putting it, because you'll have these in every big city, and maybe in small cities too. You'll see flyers up for people teaching comedy classes, and it'll always. And I don't know why so many people, want to go to these classes, but people do, and they go to comedy classes, and invariably there are all these rules of comedy, and there are things like exaggeration and surprise and incongruity and all this stuff. And those things are true up to a point, but actually, I think comedy works best when it is like showing it's reducing our reality into something silly, but it's not actually blowing things up into some kind of crazy exaggeration. It's funny. And it does create problems, especially when you're writing about really absurd places. For example, the state of Florida comes to mind.
Yeah.
And it's been a real problem in the last couple of years because there are some laws here that don't really make sense to the rest of the country. Like, you have this law that's gotten some publicity called Stand Your Ground. I don't know if you've heard much about that law, but I did a piece about how opponents of Stand Your Ground were coming up with proposing a new law called Don't Shoot Me for Absolutely No Fucking Reason, and, which I also thought would be a good, but people took that, there were a lot of people taking that seriously, and
when comedians run the world.
Exactly. And then, this actually really amazed me because again, I think sometimes when I'm writing this stuff, I'm saying, it's obviously so ridiculous, like no one's going to buy it, but this caused a lot of outrage from Floridians, but from other people too. There was that, because it was starting with something absurd, again, which was, there was that case a few weeks ago where the guy who killed the kid whose his car stereo was on too loud,
Right.
and then the guy got...
Was that in Florida? No.
That was in Florida.
Oh, really? That guy too?
Where else would it have been, Kurt?
Yeah, New
It
England.
was either Florida, or Somalia, but it was, I think it was Florida. And so, and I probably made a mistake by, either mistake or gloriously good decision, by publishing this thing within minutes of the verdict. So, people's emotions were very raw. And so I put this thing on Facebook, because the case, for those people who didn't follow it, although I'm sure you are familiar with, there's a middle-aged guy at a gas station, and he heard some young kids playing their thuggish rap music, and it was too loud, and they got into an altercation, and he shot one of the kids, and then the jury sort of couldn't decide that he was really guilty of anything, and so I guess he got
He was guilty of something.
He was guilty of something. So I did a piece just on Facebook, so I didn't think, who reads Facebook anyway? But it was Rick Scott, Governor Rick Scott, saying, and I think the headline was, Rick Scott calls for stricter volume control measures. And he was looking at that case, and he says, this case really sheds light on this state's serious problem with volume control, that people should not be allowed to play their car stereos above 5 or 6 at the loudest. And he was just saying, stop the madness. You know, it's like we've just got to say, and there was, I think, maybe, I don't know, like, this is Facebook, like 8,000 comments on this thing. And
People who took it seriously.
And people were saying things like, volume control, how about gun control? It was like, it was really like, it was like, and like people, but I was really like scared that like somebody was gonna, you know, assassinate the governor because they were so hopping mad at him. I mean, it was just like, so that actually kind of scared me a little bit. But yeah, there is that problem with certain places like in our country, like Florida or Texas. You can kind of write anything about those places, and people are gonna, you know, are gonna kind of believe.
Well, or again, conversely, things just simply the slightest reframing. There is, of course, the hundreds of thousand follower Twitter account called Florida Man.
Right, right.
Which is simply things that Florida men do are, you know, grotesquely attacking their girlfriends. Or
getting high on bath salts.
High on bath salts or stupid things, and
Right.
it's just called Florida Man.
Right.
And so, but enough with Florida. You've done all flavors and forms of humor and comedy. As a satire is your current primary form. That, unlike, say, a situation comedy or a film or a book, really is about giving voice and form in this entertaining way to a complaint, yeah?
Mm-hmm. Well, in a sense, I mean, sometimes, you know, it's so funny. I think so little about what I do, and I really do mean that. Like, to me, it's like, I'm just sort of, you know, exercising a muscle. It's like I see something happening in the world, and then I write about it. And I sometimes don't even, I mean, for example, when I write about the NRA, that's a complaint. Because, I mean, I think it's crazy that we don't have, you know, we have this, you know, 300 million guns in this country is kind of crazy. So I guess that, you know, there's some areas where it is a complaint, and you're
Right.
kind of making a statement. And, but most of the time, I'm really just trying to entertain people. The irony, or I guess the sort of hidden agenda in that, which is hidden even from me, is that to make something funny, there does have to be a kernel of truth to it. And there usually, for satire to work, there's got to be a point of view. Because if you're
Yeah.
just, I think people sometimes, especially on the internet now, there's a lot of stuff that people will call satire where they're really just sort of defaming somebody. They're just really saying something defamatory, and then they're saying, it's satire, come on, lighten up. But I mean, I think like to me, satire is all about, and this does make me very old school, but satire is all about choosing a worthy target. Like, I don't think, like, for example, Lindsay Lohan is
Right.
not worthy of satire. She's like a sick kid, you know, she's an addict. And, you know, the only thing that's really worth satirizing about Lindsay Lohan is probably all the people that have exploited Lindsay Lohan. But Lindsay Lohan itself is not, like, there's so many blogs that are about pop culture and just schadenfreude about people who are suffering. You know,
Yeah.
they might be celebrities, but they're still like, they're so damaged and suffering. So if you're writing about, to me, to write satire now, like, you have to choose a target. And so in doing so, if it's a worthy target, there probably will be some implicit complaint, because it's like you're saying, wait a minute, that's fucked up what you're doing.
And as you say, a point of view, not necessarily according to strict left-right talking points, but you look at what you do, you look at what Jon Stewart and Stephen Colbert do. All three of those cases, there is definite left-leaningness. Why is it that the right isn't more successful at producing topical satirical comedy?
You know, it's funny. I think interestingly enough, there's some things, I do think there's a difference between the way the left and the right have approached their complaints, you know, how they've chosen to exercise their complaints, and the left has been more successful at some things and the right has been more successful at others. The left has been really good in these satirical venues, even going back further, if you think of, like, in England, That Was the Week That Was, or you know, Saturday Night Live and National Lampoon. They've all been sort of left-leaning things. But on the other hand, the right wing has been so much better at talk radio. I mean, this is maybe something that we don't really think about, but
Which is, I mean, Rush Limbaugh, whatever you think of
hilarious to his audience. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the thing that we're sort of leaving out, which is
Right.
that we think, oh, the right wing, they're so unfunny. It's, we just don't think that, we think the things they're saying are like sexist, odious, homophobic, and all that. But they are hilarious to their audience. I mean, it's just like,
Right.
you know, it's just like it's not for us. It's like there are people on the right who find, you know, what Jon Stewart does absolutely unfunny because they just think that he's, you know, in the, you know, amen corner for Obama, even though that really is not even true. But
That is not true.
But, you know, they will, you know, there are people who, you know, stopped liking The Onion because The Onion started making fun of George Bush too much. And so they, you know, people sometimes associate a point of view that they disagree with as automatically not funny.
Well,
because
and-
they're no longer the intended audience.
And disagreement, the word bias has become this odd synonym for I disagree with this.
Right.
You are biased because you disagree with me.
Well, and also, I love the fact also that now in this country, disagreement and bias really does extend to the facts that we choose to either agree with or not. Like that, one of my favorite moments from the 2008 campaign, my wife stumbled on this, said some documentarian went to West Virginia, which was during the run-up to the Democratic primary there, where Obama, you can just imagine, had like about 3 votes. I mean, he was like so unpopular in West Virginia. And this guy with a microphone went up to this woman in West Virginia, and she said, he said, "Are you going to vote for Obama?" And she said, "No." And he said, "Why not?" And she said, "Because he's a Muslim." And the guy said, "Well, actually, no, ma'am, he's a Christian." And she said, "I disagree." And so I love that. We do,
Yeah.
and actually, you know, just to get back to this issue of like the right and the left and comedy, politics has gotten to be much less fun to write about for that reason.
Yes.
It's that we're so now entrenched, and you can't make. I am so complimented when I get a comment or a response to something I've done from somebody on the right wing who says, and I get this on Facebook sometimes, the best comment I ever got, where somebody says, "I think your opinions are absolutely horrible. I really disagree with everything you say, but you still make me laugh." And I think like that's in a way a compliment to him, because it shows that like he hasn't become so trollified
Yes.
like the rest of us. And people will also, you know, on the other side of this, people on the left who usually love what I do, I just have to say one little thing about Obama or Hillary, and they are like so mad at me and so humorless.
Yes.
So I just feel like this partisanship, in addition to destroying the country, is also really bad for comedy in a way, because it makes people they lose their receptivity to any point of view but their own.
Right.
You know?
Right. You complain. I saw you perform as an MC not long ago, where your big complaint for the evening at this organization that was devoted to making writers get paid for their writing was large profit-making media enterprises, one in particular, who feel as though, hey, you should write for free for us.
Right. Well, that's, you know, we're in this museum dedicated to design and art, and, you know, behind all these great artworks, there's somebody who actually had to work to create that. And so you have to think about, where is the stuff going to come from? Where are the novels going to come from? Where is the music, and where's the great
But it's
artwork
for the
gonna come?
passion of doing it.
Right.
Andy.
Well, here's my sort of bête noire with all this, is that the digital revolution, which is supposed to be such a great democratizing thing, and it is, look, there's some things that are awesome about the digital revolution. I love seamless.com, you know, in New York, like when I don't want to cook, it's so great to just go to my app, and then there's like an enchilada.
Anybody that delivers will deliver it to you if you want it.
Exactly. I mean, and I think, look, I mean, I have Spotify, so I listen to a lot of music that I wouldn't ordinarily be able to sample otherwise, and I'm probably not paying enough for it because of the
And by the way, the
Spotify.
Borowitz report, a digital product.
It is a digital product, but a lot of people are reading it. You know, it's supported by ads now because it's the New Yorker. But no, so I'm a part of this world, and I embrace it up to a point. However, there is something going on with these corporations and the arts, which is is a complaint. This, by the way, is not funny. I just got to share this, but now what they try to do, everybody tries to do this, is they'll go to a writer and they'll say, we'd like you to write something for us. This actually happened to me a few years ago, that the Wall Street Journal came to me and said, we'd like you to tweet the Academy Awards for us. And I thought, well, now there's a novel idea. No one's tweeting the Oscars. I could really fill a void there. But you know, like I have mouths to feed at home, so I said, you know, well, how much are you paying for that? And they said, oh, well, no, we're not paying you for this, but you know, we'll mention your website, and we'll link to your website, and it'll be really good for your brand. And this is the new thing that's used to, you know, to sucker in, because writers and artists are such insecure people anyway, that if the Wall Street Journal says, you know, oh, do this and we'll link to your site and it's good for your brand, you sort of start saying, well, maybe I haven't done enough branding. Maybe I should work for free. It'd be really good for my brand. I actually sort of feel cool with my brand, so I was sort of like, I was sort of like saying, would appearing in the Wall Street Journal be bad for my brand? It might be. But I said, well, you know, I don't work for free. And I just don't, you know, if I'm doing something for charity, I'll do something for, but I think writers should get paid for what they do. And then they try to raise the ante by saying, well, Margaret Atwood did it last year. That's what they said. So, and it was like, bam, Margaret Atwood. I was like, you know, I don't know how things work up in Canada. You know, it's like, it might
I think
be
the government pays her to tweet the
They
Oscars.
they might. It's like a barter economy. It's like she gets some cheese or something. I don't know. But it was, you know, I'm fortunate because I've been doing this now for like 35 years, and I've had time to, like, the Borowitz Report's been out there for like 13 years. I've had actually time to build up a brand, so like people will read my stuff, you know, and I'm very grateful for that. But I worry about like the 25-year-old, like who's right out of college and is looking to maybe become a writer, and they're just absolutely can't even work at a subsistence level because everyone is so into, you know, wants them to tweet and to, you know, to do stuff for free for their brand. And the other thing is that there's just such a, you know, if you look at Twitter, there's just all these people just relentlessly tweeting. And I did it for a few years. I did it for about 3 years because I was just
Building your brand.
Yeah, I was building my brand, but also like as a comedian, you're very addicted to that response, and it's a sign of psychiatric damage that you are. I mean, most people really can get through the day without somebody retweeting them. You know, it's like most of us can sort of live our lives, but for comedians especially, I think it's a real trap because you just get really used to hearing that response. And I finally stopped because I felt it was not a healthy thing. But I look at all this and I think we're all providing all this free content to places like Twitter. Meanwhile, the guys who founded Twitter are walking off with like billions of dollars. And I mean, that is like, has there ever been a bigger sucker's game than Twitter, really? I mean, like, it's just an amazing thing that you have all these smart people, Margaret Atwood, all these people providing all this free content. But if you went to Margaret Atwood and said, we'd love you to write a novel up for us, it'll be good for your brand.
Yeah, exactly.
Would she sit down for 3 years and do that? But it's like, I just think I'm in my tiny little way making the stand for writers and saying, I think we should get paid for what we do. But I think it's true of all the arts, and you know, I know some art is always done just out of, you know, the pure desire to express yourself, and God knows there are easier ways to make a living than being in the arts. But having said that, we're not going to have any arts if no artists ever get paid because they're so busy branding. So.
And as Dr. Johnson said,
only a knucklehead would.
Blockhead. Only a
I'd like to change it to knucklehead.
Okay.
Only a blockhead would write for
not right for money.
Not
yeah.
right for money.